All right, awesome. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the TFTuesday Podcast. My name is Zill. It's good to have you all back here again today. The weather has not been cooperating this week, and I'm honestly, frankly annoyed about that, but that's neither here nor there. And depending on what happens, we may have a pretty exciting season finale next week. So we will keep you in suspense there on that front. I'm joined by my illustrious co-host, K-Libra. How are you doing, K-Libra?
I'm just wondering if you've repented to your weather lords.
Oh, always. I mean, I'm complaining about the weather, but I am repenting.
I think that everybody needs to remember that part of repentance to your weather lords is stopping your powers and oligarchs from destructing you and your planet. And also to be grateful for the weather that your weather lords deliver to you, regardless of whether it's nice or not, whether it's special or cool or anything like that.
I gotta work on that, honestly.
You have to be grateful for the weather before it all goes down into the center of the death spiral, and then you will have no variance in weather. Our carbon-drunken weather lords will have trouble giving you all the special weather that we get and all this varieties, both unpleasant and pleasant. How can you know what is good and what is bad, what feels good, what feels rotten? What feels good is joining our Patreon. Do that. You'll feel better that you're contributing to something that you care about and that feeds into the community in a very direct way. You can give as little or as much as you want. After all, you know, we understand that times are stupid and criminally stupid. But yeah, it would be nice for anybody listening to consider or tell somebody else to do it. Maybe they don't even know our content, but they make a lot of money. Tell them to just give us some of that.
It's true. It's true. Well, something we do have, of course, is always a variance in guests, too. And we're joined today by a new face, DoggoDraws, who's here with us today. How's it going, Doggo?
That was a hell of an intro. Jesus Christ, I was not expecting that. Well, I'm good. My weather sucks, too, if it makes you guys feel better.
Have you repented, though?
No, I love this weather. It sucks. It's amazing. I hate the sun.
Okay. It sounds like repentance is still a work in progress.
I'll put me back in high school. Catholic high school I don't want to think about that.
I'm shaking your hand there. But yeah, no, it's great to have you on the podcast. I know that we got to connect at FWA, and I was curious to hear a little bit about your journey into the TF fandom and like how you found it and what inspired you to kind of stick around and start making art, because I know you've been making art for a little while now too.
Yeah, it's funny. I was going over the questions and trying to remember how I found all of this. It's going to put a date on me, but I remember when Five Nights at Freddy's first came out when I was in middle school. I'm like, well, that's a cool idea. Completely forgot about it until like Zootopia came out, and I'm like, oh, okay, you know what? This is a whole thing. And I remember a very specific piece by Royal Poodle, and I'm like, oh my god, what the hell is that? And why is it interesting? And then I have been on a downward spiral ever since, from basic transformation into what I currently specialize on, being inanimate, which, yeah, I cannot do that. I cannot really talk about that sober because it is so weird to me. But you know what? I enjoy it.
Nice. And how did you stumble on Royal's art? I have to ask, because that's a pretty specific intersection that I imagine you wouldn't just find perusing the internet.
This was back when Twitter was still viable, like, when Jack was still running it. And so I just had that, like, suggestion. I'm like, what the hell is a TF Nation? I'm like, what's TF? Does it just mean the fuck? And I was going through it, and I just see that one piece, and I'm like, huh, that's a really good artist. And, it's been a long journey ever since, and I met them at FWA last year, and I don't think I ever told them they were the reason I'm into TF, but they might find out.
They might listen, you never know. So, but no, that's pretty cool. And I guess FWA last year, was that your first furry convention?
Yeah, I figured I might as well just like do it, finally get it over with. Rich kept telling me I need to go to a con or something, and so he's like, just go to this one. I'm like, okay, I don't know what Atlanta's like, but sure.
Gotcha. Nice. Well, obviously you've kind of mentioned that through your finding of Royal and such, you started getting into transformation art, and then obviously there was a through line towards your current focus, which is a lot of inanimate TF. It sounds like you were potentially drawn to that concept first by what you saw from Royal or other people within the transformation community. But was there like a particular other inspiration or connection that really started that fascination with it?
I think if we look at the line of progression, it really went from, oh, werewolves and the monkey TF that I saw from Royal to, oh, pool toys, those are kind of cool, to, wait a second, you can be the air in the pool toys. And so it really just, every level I see, I'm like, oh, interesting. And I'll look into it further and find something different. I'm like, oh my God, where does this end? Yet to find the bottom.
Mm-hmm. So you're kind of chasing that forever high of trying to figure out what the nichest transformation is? That's what it sounds like?
Eventually I'll get there. I can assure you that.
Well, because that's always interesting to me, because I think I've seen this meme go around before where like some people will like, they find the things they're into and they're totally cool with that, and that's where they stay, and they're just like into the thing that they're into. And then there's other people who like, they dip their toes in and 3 years down the line they're into something as niche as pool toys or whatnot. And I've always tried to understand what the difference is in terms of sticking with the things that you just know you like versus this like going down this kind of path, so to speak, into like the nichest sort of transformations. Would you say there was like a fascination with like inanimate TF from like an escapism perspective, or like was it more of like a punishment angle or liberation or just something else?
I'm so glad I have the questions pulled up with my notes. So particularly because I do a lot of this stuff for other people, I've explored what gets them going, and it typically is something between escapism and punishment. I mean, I can pull up some examples. I have this coincided with my gallery right now, so I can, reference things. But I did something like a stand ETF of Rambly, who so excited for chapter 2. But that one I would say more is a punishment variation. I mean, this person is not excited to be it. This is something that is just dark and kind of gritty, and my coloring matches the tone of that to make it hot for the danger. But then I'll have stuff that you'll probably talk about later on, being the rubber suits, that I can view more as escapism, as somebody is like, you know what, let me become the Nuggets mascot Rocky. We're not going to name that somebody or why he might have caused them to lose game 7, but like that's, you want to seek a more ideal version of yourself, whether that be something completely different or something comforting, such as a mascot.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes to kind of that like difference between like the punishment and escapism, do you tend to prefer one of those types for yourself versus what you draw of other people, or is it always kind of like a mix of like exploring different angles?
It's funny enough, I have grown very indifferent towards a lot of what I do myself, which is why I tend to not do anything for myself. But if I really were to pick, I kind of prefer the darker angle. I mean, it gives such a permanence that I kind of can enjoy and finally be like, okay, you know what, this is where I'm stopping. This, I don't need to worry about what I'm doing next.
So kind of like you'd almost want to aim towards achieving that state of not having to worry about X, Y, Z and just be the thing, basically.
I think it would give me a more simplified mindset that I could very much enjoy instead of having to go about each day of our modern horrors.
That's true.
I'm just wondering, you said that you're kind of indifferent to what you make for yourself, so you just make you've become kind of numb to what you make.
Yeah, pretty much. It's very, I know, probably taboo to say, but I've lost so much enjoyment, but I still have such a passion for art that.
Why is that?
I really think it's due to just how commonplace I can go on Blue Sky and I can see like all this stuff and get my dopamine rush that I've really just. It doesn't please me to do just something for myself anymore. I really like it when I do stuff for other people because I can see an enjoyment from them that I can vicariously live through.
Interesting. That's a very roundabout way to do it. In a way, you have turned yourself into a content machine, and you are doing the thing that you're just doing the thing.
Yeah, pretty much.
Kind of change yourself permanently in that way.
Yeah.
Or at least indefinitely. You could change it any time you actually want to.
It's true. Indefinitely.
I just find it a little tragic when people kind of like live for other people, but it's something that I had to ask about because I don't think I really hear about somebody becoming numb to it, but sort of pressing on to do a version of it that skirts around the things that they want. It's very interesting to me. And now I'm wondering how many other people have done this sort of thing to themselves over the years.
Yeah, I feel like that is an experience that definitely a few people have found themselves in. And I think, I don't know, I've definitely experienced a little bit of numbness to my own art before too. And it's taken like, either doing stuff for other people that then kind of ignites some sort of personal re-enjoyment, or, shifting entirely away to something completely different and then coming back to it, that has sometimes helped with that kind of element and getting me back into it. And I think and maybe this is the same for you, Doggo, I think regardless of whatever sort of numbness to my art, I've always still had that baseline interest, at least in exploring concepts or seeing how other people react to them, that always keeps me kind of in the mix. But it sounds like for you, at least, the kind of focus on that has been just your current kind of raison d'etre, so to speak.
I apologize. I kind of hung up on when you said you're feeling a numbness as I just pulled up your mannequin TF. That might make sense. He might be doing that. I can't agree. I do have that numbness, but there is one thing about me that I am fully fueled on spite, and just I don't know when to quit. I'm a person that was told, hey, you can't really understand fractions and you are terrible at math. Maybe don't do anything in that in 5th grade, and I am going to get a master's degree in bioengineering. I am somebody that's like, you know what? I'm too deep into this now, but also there is still that original thing of what got me to do push. So I apologize if I lost the question.
I mean, no, I think you got it. Honestly, spite is a very good motivator. Sometimes I can co-sign that to a degree.
I'd be careful
being
with
told
that.
You can't do something. That's true. But being told you can't do something and then doing it anyways is I think, something good. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it is fine. It's good to be defiant in that way. But then some people end up mistaking that as the only fuel they'll need. And then that will lead to burnout. I have done it many times over the years. Pushing and bulldozing and doing it in spite of things. It will take you a long way. There will be a burnout period, though. Since Five Nights at Freddy's was you in middle school, I say you have a lot of time to figure this out, and I'm giving you an early warning so that when you see the signs, you'll know why that is.
No, I understand that. I appreciate the heads up. I mean, eventually I'll get back into doing more, because I do still get some enjoyment on non-transformative art. There is, and I do push myself to do that occasionally, something just for myself. It's typically more of a modern art landscape that I'll just put in my room, or something we'll talk about probably later if we get to that section of questions. But
yeah,
so I still have
that
awareness of what I'm feeling.
All right.
And it sounds at least because your art has touched on so many different kinds of inanimate TF, there's a drive towards kind of what you described before of finding the bottom, so to speak. And so I guess, is that kind of how, or what motivates you to choose the things that you might transform other people into? Or is there something in particular that will spark whatever kind of new thing that you're trying to depict in an art piece?
I think I actually have two good examples of that. So we can look, if somebody ever goes through what I've done, it's fairly recent at the time of this recording, but that chocolate TF, it's not one I love, but that was entirely just, was predicated on somebody saying, or me watching a YouTube ad saying, lint, it'll make you melt. I'm like, what the fuck did they just say? And then someone's like, you should do that. I'm like, okay. So I'll get stuff around from then, but then I'm going to pull up the question again, because I will go on these rants and I will forget what I'm saying.
No, you're good.
I also will just look at everyday objects and be like, I wonder if I could do that. I did a cigar because I'm like, you know what? That would be kind of funny. And I ended up just doing a whole 4-part sequence of that purely because I just remembered that thing exists. And I'm like, why do people smoke that? But I can sit in a library and be like, it would be kind of fun if somebody got turned into a book, and then I'll find somebody. I'm like, hey, I understand you like this, this, and this. I can coincide it with what I would like to do and just come with a third product of this is what turns out to be.
Right. Gotcha. So, and that's interesting. You kind of, like you said, you almost will look for folks who might be interested in that kind of concept when you want to explore it, because again, it's less of you want yourself to turn into it, but more let me see someone who likely would be interested in that more niche transformation experience it and then see their kind of reaction to seeing it happen.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, we can look at what you said about an hour ago when I sent you that file of you being turned into a ratchet toy. I mean, that was something that came from Scritch when he was like, hey, I think a Rocket Raccoon toy would be good. And I'm like, you know what else would be? Because that was fun. And you said you liked it. I'm like, well, what if I did it with a game series I've never played? I just looked through everything you info dumped about that to me. I'm like, okay, what if there was something like a toy gun, like that decoy glove? And then it kind of came with that.
Yeah.
And then, your reaction was so funny. It always, I love doing that because you just, all caps, it brings me joy.
Okay, well, that's good. I do tend to be very expressive in my reactions.
That's
I'm
what I look
glad
for.
that hits the mark. Well, then I guess because, one of the things that then, and you've spoken a little bit about this already to be clear, but there's also that kind of psychological aspect in terms of what your subjects end up experiencing. I know we talked a little bit about how at least, there's a blend of escapism, punishment sort of element that you will kind of put into many of these pieces. When you think about the more like conceptual lens, because I know obviously a lot of your pieces will have actual like narratives attached to them in the body of the piece, what sort of like impact do you like to kind of imbue into those subjects? Because I've seen a few different variations in your gallery in terms of what you kind of angle towards. And I was curious if, at least when you kind of conceptualize it, if you prefer more of like a blank slate or like a kind of like identity death angle, or if there's more of like a mental change into that object's new state or like something else.
That's an interesting one. That was one of the few questions that I was looking at, especially at the gym this morning. I'm like, how do I answer this? And you're the reason I didn't PR on my bench press today. So I'm blaming you because I got distracted.
Okay,
by
that's
that.
fine.
I do, when I start a piece, I never know where it's going, which sounds weird, but like, I really don't. I go in with that. I mean, especially if it's not a commission, I will be like, this is what I'm going to infer. They are just going to get whatever they get. But I do lean towards the identity death and impermanence. You can probably look at how many words I use and how many times the word permanent or forever comes up within there. Purely because I know that's like one of the biggest draws to people with inanimate is that's your only choice. You are now such and such object. And, I think the Geo one, I forget that I'm like the sole foreign artist for Geronimo Still, or at least I feel like I am sometimes. But I can, if you look at the I look at the caption of it, I very much imply that it's open-ended, but most likely permanent. And the comments, go for that too. So I do go into a mindset of, I don't know how this is going to go, but I'll fall back on identity death, blank slate death.
And do you think there's like I guess I'm trying to best understand what draws you to that versus like kind of the sort of more just like, oh, now you're kind of like in this sort of headspace. Is it the lack of thinking that is attractive there, or is it something else?
I think when you probably saw me at the bar that first time, you're like, this person probably has never had a thought in his life with that backwards hat. But I do like the idea of, you're just going to stop. And just call me lazy from that standpoint of, if I say this thing is permanent and you're going to stop thinking, then I don't have to draw a follow-up or, ever undo it.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody ever has to fill out something completely to a story beginning and end. I think that's one of the things that's made me feel shitty about my art, and I've had to unlearn that the expectations of people really just fuck that up. Why do you need to have a beginning and a middle, a lore, a background, a reason? Why can't you just do the thing that you feel? It really commodifies art in a way that I do not like, and it makes the TF space a very fucked up place to be when you have that kind of expectation. It's kind of fucked up, I think, that you feel that way, that you consider it lazy to not have those things.
I get what you're saying. I just, part of creating such a little lore or, just story that goes along with it is kind of my way of expanding on stuff I don't feel like including in there, but I feel like would be kind of fun.
Well, then that's what you're doing for you. That's great. But there was the framing of that's what people like. And it keeps coming up in those kind of places where, sure, it's what you like to do, but then you feel lazy when you don't do it. But if you don't feel like doing it, you're not being lazy. You're simply reserving that for another time. I don't put everything I have into every single thing I do. Nobody does. I don't think anybody really should, or at least be expected to.
You know, I can't disagree with what you're saying. I feel like I understand it. I just can't necessarily. I think it's more of a personal bias towards myself of letting myself down, or just, taking it from a very subjective point of view of like, if I don't include this, and it's bad, I'll be real, but I don't. I think it's fine for me to keep doing it. I mean, I hope people aren't taking this from me. It's like this person is writing all this, and so if I ever try to do something, I don't want to set an unrealistic standard, but it's mostly just something I like to do with my own art.
Well, it's the framing of laziness, because laziness implies falling short of an expectation due to some sort of great fault. And with transformation, it's very easy to feel that way if you see somebody who is able to make many comics, many sequences, some like the few and far between, but slightly increasing number of people who do animations, and a certain someone who decides that if you have a fuck ton of steps in a sequence, it makes it really, 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 really good. And that's fucking absurd. I think that just makes for burnout. I mean, one of the most grating things that is probably going to stay with me for the rest of my life whenever I make anything transformation related, whether it's commission or anything in general, is, will this be a sequence? And that always has devalued anything I have ever done. And anybody who asks that, like off the bat, consider whether you're going to be doing that. Because I can understand how in some instances something may kind of feel like, oh, is this like whatever? But I mean, why does it matter if it's going to be a sequence? It doesn't matter. It really doesn't. The artists are going to do what they aim to do. And that sort of thing, again, it devalues what's there. I get concerned about this sort of thing because, again, like, I'm way older than you. And while I'm not trying to pull rank, I am trying to say, like, I've been feeling that sort of thing when I've had people asking me about lore, reasons, triggers, who the character is, and another annoying one, which is, what are they turning into? When I wanted to do something kind of ambiguous with certain features, it's like people want things spoon-fed to them. And for a while, it made me feel like I was falling short. And I'm just thinking that it's something to be fucking careful with, like really fucking careful, because I was experiencing that in my fucking 20s.
I get what you're saying. You know what? I'm going to keep this in mind. I apologize. I can't necessarily give you the answer you're looking for on this.
No.
I wasn't coming in prepared for this, but I really appreciate what you've given me. And this is something I'm going to be thinking about. I can't answer in a way that I feel like I could justify this, because this isn't something is like surface level. This is something that requires introspection and, looking at a broader sense. My best thing is saying right now I enjoy it.
I'm just putting it out there. Like, nobody needs to give me some sort of commitment. I'm not looking for a response or an answer to a question about something that takes a lot of thought. Clearly, you have a general understanding of what you're doing and why. And I'm just pointing out, hey, this is something that's, I think, is kind of problematic with the expectations that artists are either implicitly or otherwise expected to put into the fandom. Shit can be very harmful, and then before you know it, then people have problems doing shit for themselves when they can't figure out why they aren't really happy with their stuff, even if they're making it for somebody else. I've met a few people who seemed very, very happy making other people happy, and that was the crux of why they make anything. And then they fell off the face of the planet, and that really sucks to see. And again, I'm not looking for like a definitive answer, but I really appreciate that you are saying that you'd be giving us some thought. And if you do that, then I haven't wasted my time.
I'd like to ask you a follow-up. So I'm kind of hung up on one thing you said. That do you think that problem is something that artists need to define themselves of, like, hey, this isn't what I'm going to be doing? Or do you think that's more something like people need to start getting used to that not every artist is going to be doing all this, and it's more of on them than rather than on us.
I kind of don't understand the question.
I get that. I completely start.
To?
I'm looking outside a window and I'm like getting distracted all about half the time. You know what? I think if it's okay with you guys, I'm just looking at the rest of the questions and the time. Should we move on to
let's
more of the rubber stuff?
Yeah.
Again, I appreciate.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, all we care about is giving you something to think about for both the audience and the guests. So I think that's something to chew on and reflect on. But yeah, I mean, thinking about kind of some of the other stuff that you've done, I know that a lot of the intersection with inanimate has also been rubber focused changes, and that's been something I think that you've put a lot of emphasis on within your work. And I know that it has like a very slick, glossy aesthetic that's quite distinct. It's one I personally enjoy. But what would you say kind of drew you to that specific look for your drawn transformations? Because it is a theme that comes up over and over again within your pieces.
Yeah, that's exactly why I held off from doing a rubber coating today on yours. But yeah, I'm just kidding. I think it's more of just like what's left over from when I was doing pool toys a lot, because I take audience feedback, and people have always given me like, hey, I really like your pool toys and your rubber suits, and I'm like, okay, that's fine. I actually do enjoy doing the little I go over it. I take a hard pen and I just do a color dodge and then duplicate it, white coat it, and then just mess around with it. And it's kind of just relaxing, like you're filling in an adult coloring book. And it just so happens that a lot of the stuff I do, or a lot of the transformations, can have that rubber coating applied, and people are like, ooh, and then covers up my flaws too.
What sort of flaws is it covering up? Now I got to ask about that.
If you ever look too deeply into anything I do, you will probably see that I forget to erase some of my line work. That it really does cover up like shading errors and proportion errors. I think my best bet is actually one I did for Tuesday this week, was the rubber Timon one. I mean, I am god awful at clothes folding, and this person's like, hey, can I have it where the suit is coming off? I'm like, that happens, but more so I'm like, I can use the rubber to cover up the fact that there's not as much line work to show folds, and to really distract people of like, oh, does this make an anatomical sense, or I don't think a suit would fall down that way.
So in essence, part of the draw is it's helped with in a sense it has helped you continue to develop your style while still catching up on certain areas. Would that be a fair assessment?
You put it nicer than I did, so yeah, let's go with that.
Okay, that's fair. I guess that's definitely an interesting angle on it, because I don't know. Oftentimes, I feel like rubber has a lot of association with like BDSM and like by extension a lot of like control and submission dynamics, and so that's obviously a very different take on it. But I do feel like your work probably still fits in with those dynamics a lot of the time, particularly in terms of the framing. Would you say that's fair, or do you feel like your focus is still completely separate from that?
That was one of the other questions that I was hung up on earlier. So I never have looked at my work through the BDSM angle myself, but I can absolutely see where that comes in from. You got suits taking over people and like dominating them, and you got people like, I don't know, this one guy who got turned into a mannequin, very submissive. And so there is underlying themes towards that, but it's never my focal point or what my intention is when I do it. I think it's more so a byproduct of something I create. And I'm like, oh, that's funny. Is this an art history class? Like, I do not put meaning enough into what I do. I just do stuff because people like it, or because it's, hot to people.
Yeah. No, I think that's definitely been kind of a through line in terms of a lot of what you've kind of shared so far. And I guess it's interesting because I think when it comes to inanimate and rubber transformations and such, when a lot of people talk about the psychology of it, the BDSM angle comes up so often. And I've definitely felt like it's a bit more dynamic than just that. So I appreciate that that's not really necessarily the angle you're going for either. I just mention it because it's something that I have seen come up within this space when we're talking about it a number of times. And I feel like it's one of those, like, when you have like a hammer, everything's a nail. I feel like a lot of people have that perspective towards inanimate TF. And it's like, sure, maybe you could push it into that hole, so to speak, but it's not necessarily always what the artist is really intending.
Yeah, I feel like if we were to take deeper meaning into inanimate, I would personally say it's more pursuit of perfectionism. I mean, people will look at objects, especially, bright, shiny rubber ones or stuff that doesn't look faded, and say, I would like to become that in a way of, I won't have flaws. But then you can look at people wanting to be like discarded socks or discarded underwear and being like, this gives me reflection to myself, showing me that I'm somebody that's not perfect and that I can have flaws even and still be okay.
Interesting. I've never really considered that from like the used object perspective. So I'm kind of, my interest is piqued in hearing you describe it that way, that sort of like acceptance of flaws, so to speak. Have you ever like felt that way about some of like the pieces where you've become that, or has that been something you've heard from other people when you've done those kinds of pieces for them?
This is more so just a theory I have myself, and I try not to look too much into psychology, so I can, when I do argue with Scritch, because he loves it when I tell him his work is wrong, that he knows I'm coming from a point of nowhere. But I feel like if you're looking at it, why would people want to be something like discarded? One that always reminds me is this one guy who gives a lot for me. I call him Swiss cheese because he's from Switzerland, but he will typically get very dark-end TFs. And I always ask him why. And he always just says, it'd be funny. And I'm like, and then the more I know him, I'm like, I wonder if it's a way of him having like self-acceptance of flaws, or maybe he really just like, wanting to become a sock that's used up and ripped. So it's probably different for everyone. That's just a personal theory I had.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's interesting that it was described as quote unquote funny. But I definitely see the angle you're kind of coming from here and trying to intellectualize it and kind of derive that sort of deeper meaning. I guess when it comes to, going back to some of the rubber changes in particular, do you like to kind of differentiate between transforming into like a rubber version of someone versus like a standard kind of like blank slate, like statue, mannequin, doll, whatever? Or are they all kind of similar end states in your mind, at least conceptually?
That one was interesting because I was thinking about that. If let's take the mannequin one, for example, because I want to hear what you guys think about this. If you are completely rubberized in and out, is that still animate? Like, where do you define animate versus inanimate? Especially, is it just, you have to still be like human on the inside, but rubber coating outside like it's round? Does that still count as animate? Do you have to have no movement?
Yeah.
Sorry, the thing about being animate is often something that can have some kind of agency, and typically being able to animate yourself is a big part of that. If you can remove yourself physically from a situation, then that is part of generally considered personhood or something like that. You can build sympathy, and when it comes to being a person, if you have the ability to move yourself or prevent something, that kind of thing, it's a big part of having control. However, being animate is something that, I guess, if you want to get like super into the weeds, I think of the linking roots of like anima or is like animism. I'm trying. My etymology is not too good, but animism, and animism is applying traits of living things, often personhood, to things. So it can kind of go both ways. And if you want to talk about whether something is fully rubber in or out, then are you looking at it from an animist perspective, or are you looking at it in terms of something that has the physical agency to move itself and, or protect itself or assert itself, anything like that? So, I mean, those are really like the questions of like whether or not you're applying any of those themes or concepts. So something that is rubber on the inside and out could certainly be animate, especially if you decide that it can move, it can think, it can breathe, it can eat, it can sense things as we typically do. So, yeah, I mean, something being animate is something that can be a very broad category. However, because we don't think of things, including things that are fully made of a substance that is not for living things, then we're going to call it inanimate because it more quickly fits that umbrella.
No, I think that's actually a really good way of putting it. I don't think I could have put it better myself. And at least in terms of like my personal preferences, I think I enjoy both kind of aspects. So it really just depends on the situation, the thing itself, and, a mood that might strike me on any given day. I think both are interesting end states, and it really just depends on that animism perspective.
Interesting. I personally I have to agree. It's very much situational. And I think if we were getting a theme of how I do my art, I don't necessarily think super deeply about it, rather more so on a surface level.
I think that at least sometimes when, you have art pieces, particularly when they're commissioned, I'm sure a lot of the then like deeper level of, thinking can be how the audience or the commissioner or what have you kind of reacts and puts their own kind of presuppositions onto an art piece. I mean, art in general is, something that people experience in different ways. And so sometimes, you can just let the audience drive whatever it is that they might like and kind of leave it at that. You don't have to necessarily put in that sort of deeper thinking.
No, I have to absolutely agree. I don't necessarily leave stuff open-ended if you count what I write with it to be exact, but it is very much a subjective thing. I mean, art in general is completely subjective. So, yeah. I liked your guys' answers more. Why do you guys have to keep showing me up?
We've been doing this for a while. Yeah. Well, then I did have one last question on the rubber front, because I think, at least in terms of how I've seen it presented from you, they seem to be distinct from each other. But what do you think differentiates then that pure inanimate TF from rubber transformations? Or are they really just, very much overlapping in a Venn diagram?
They're overlapping for me. I mean, especially with the bulk of my recent works being those suits, I view that as completely inanimate. I'm literally writing the text, "You're never going to get out. It is permanent," or it's permanent. I mean, there's one example, probably in my last 30 pieces of work, that anybody ever comes out, and even then they're, a rubber meerkat. So part of it, that just harkens back to where you describe if it's animate or not. So does that necessarily answer what you were saying?
I think so.
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
Awesome. Well, yeah, there was one other kind of area that I noticed come up in your art pieces that's separate from kind of the inanimate transformations. And I'll confess I don't have a full grasp of the appeal to it. So I'm definitely going to be coming at this from a newcomer perspective. But I know that there's a lot of like shrinking and kind of micro TFs that aren't necessarily paired with other changes, be it like, inanimate, animal, what have you. It's just the person kind of shrinking. And, I was curious to better understand what fascinates you the most about that idea. Because again, I don't really have as much of a basis in it. Is it something about the scale or like the power dynamics, or is there something else kind of going on there?
So this was actually the first kink I've ever really liked before TF. I even knew that existed. So I do have much more to say on this kind of topic. I know this is more of a TF podcast, so I'll try to keep it somewhat intertwined.
Hey, it still counts. It still counts as transformation.
Yeah. So I don't do it as much as I should, but I can definitely pull up some examples for myself to reference. But a lot of times when I do these kind of things, I mean, granted, you met me in person. I am tall and big and can throw you around. I just enjoy the fact that somebody that is very often seen as somebody intimidating or large can just have such a small and helpless kind of role reversal to take away the one thing I have, you know, above people and give them that power is very interesting to me. And so whenever I do like to pair it with other stuff. I mean, typically that is, vor or feet, you know, some juggernauts of furry porn I've seen. But it gives it's like it's a multiplier to me where, yeah, I like this piece already, but add on this person is like centimeters size and it's perfect.
Gotcha. So it is an element of like that helplessness and that kind of switching of the power dynamics of someone who perhaps was, like you said, like intimidating maybe in their original state, but now they're kind of helpless and at the whim of whoever is nearby, basically.
Almost entirely, yeah.
I have a thought about that, if you're willing to hear me out. The fact that somebody would view themselves as, inherently intimidating, scary, and things like that, it kind of comes off to me like maybe it comes off as you kind of wishing that people would kind of not veer away from you, not be scared of you, because there's a lot of people who really enjoy the idea of being feared, because fear and respect and love, they like all like blend together in some kind of weird mishmash. But it sucks when people are scared of you all the time. So is it maybe less about being helpless and maybe a bit more about being likable?
It's an interesting view of that, but I found it to be more of just a byproduct of like the environment I'm in a non-furry space. People have oftentimes used me. They're like, "Hey, will you do this because you're gonna just like come off across with a much more dominant tone?" And it's like, that's fine. I feel like if we really look at this, there is underlying trauma, and my one note for this was saying, don't trauma dump. They don't need to know that to this. So as much as I'd love to go deeper into why I feel like it could be more of a likability standpoint, I know that's just a rabbit hole where we will find out something deeply disturbing about me that not everyone needs to know.
I mean, yeah, that's fine. Also, I think you answered my question pretty well because to me your answer is very telling anyway.
Yeah, I would agree with that, honestly.
Okay, I'm concerned, but yeah, okay.
What, you want to know?
No, I feel like if I ask, I'm just going to have my feelings hurt. But,
I mean, I will tell you this much: it's not a slight against you. The thought I formulated after what you told me has nothing to do with like your shortcomings or anything like that. Ha ha ha! Shortcomings.
I gotta be honest, that one was a little forced in my opinion, but that's okay.
I appreciated it.
Forced, like I give a fuck. You think people don't force the puns like all the goddamn time, and that's why I do it bitterly, and that's why it's a good anti-joke. You people can not laugh, but laugh internally and intellectually know that it's funny. I win. Anyway, yeah, it has nothing to do with you or anything that I think that whatever. So yeah, if you want to know, I'll tell you. Otherwise, we can move along.
I'm worried that we go over an hour, so maybe after.
If you have time, we have time. But otherwise, it's fine.
Okay. No, I know myself better. I'm not going to ask the follow-up.
Okay.
Fair enough. Well, I think one of the other elements that I've seen a lot of in your pieces is that the kind of characters that end up getting shrunk will be so small that they're only kind of visible through these cutout zoom-in frames that you'll include as well. And I was curious how that sort of compositional approach came to you, and if you feel like that kind of emphasizes the emotions and scale that you like to explore in your pieces.
That's a good question. And my answer is going to suck because all I'm going to say is I'm lazy. No, entirely. When I first started doing the more forced perspective kind of viewing, such as you will see commonly with those larger things, it's really part of my process is I always start everything on paper. So I don't want to detail in too much, and then when I put it to canvas, I'm already working with a limited size, and it's like, well, I can't detail it too much, but if I don't detail it enough, I'm not going to like it. So I feel like using the cutout version, it can show more detail and the emotion and such. But it also is like a way I can, show if somebody actually is down there and not just like, hey, believe me, there's that spec is used to be somebody. Like, trust me, bro.
I don't think that's necessarily lazy. I think that's just you finding a middle ground between the tension of what you maybe want to do and that sort of expectation stuff that we talked about before. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah, I get it.
Isn't. It gets the job done. Because what else? Like, sometimes when you put something to such a scale, you have to find a way to express it. That's just one way to do it. It's, I don't know. I just imagine the feats somebody would have to go to in order to express something like the quark size that Ant-Man can shrink down to, or some ridiculous bullshit like that. And that's a task in its own. And also, yeah, when you go into extremes, you have to abstract it. But is the abstraction and the representation of that really what you're looking for? Or are you just looking to be like, hey, look how small he is, which is fine. It's all you really need to do if that's what you're looking to do.
I'm going to say more of the latter. I mean, you're going to kill me. Please just don't. This is going to sound really bad. I look to try to get something that fits algorithms. So I'm going with a mindset, especially with these pieces. I'm like, people aren't going to be as nuanced. People are just going to want to see giant feet and get off on that. So I mean, it's just a middle ground, really.
It's fine. I mean, I'm not gonna kill you for it. I look. I'm gonna be very clear about something. When I talk about things like contempt for the audience and doing things for yourself and everything like that, I say that for myself as much as I say it for anybody else, because I have gone through my own shit of not feeling liked or feeling like somehow I'm not going to matter. And that's my own shit that I can trauma dump for people if they really fucking want to. It's if they want to hear that shit. It's just that you're doing the thing that you want, and it's just fine. And I'm not going to be super upset at you for... Man, you never even talked to me before, and you don't necessarily have to listen to me, so I'm not going to be fucking, like, super pissed about anything, especially since you already listened to my spiel before, and you were like, oh, yeah, I'll give that some thought. Cool, great. It's good, man. Hey, you know what? I'll turn it to a little bit more positive. I do not get the super micro stuff. There is an appeal I have to. There's an appeal I found to like size difference. There is too much and too little for me, and I found that when somebody gets way too big or small, I think, okay, that's kind of cool, but what do I do now? There's nothing I can do. I want to do things.
Yeah, I definitely get that. I try not to do too much micro because I have a predominantly TF-based audience. I just use it as like this would be fun. This is something I like to do. But yeah, you're right. It is like, okay, if you're only like a nanometer tall, like, great, there goes coffee. There goes literally anything else now. It's like hot in the moment, but afterwards, it's then what you do.
I will say again, though, it is still transformation. Like, micro stuff is transformation, so...
Yeah, I can't disagree, really.
Nobody should disagree with us.
Oh, of course. I guess, and I think that kind of played into what Libra was kind of alluding to. There's obviously that element of like fully losing your autonomy. Like all these things go out the window in terms of what you could potentially do. Would you say that feeds into that interest, at least from your personal kind of perspective, or is that more of an interest that you encounter when people maybe are commissioning you for those kinds of pieces?
I never really dove too much into this, like why I get to ever people off. But personally, it's very something of in the moment I like to make the bad choices in fantasy and art. But if I think about it too much, then it's like, maybe that's not the hottest thing ever. Like especially because I see the audience question, it's going to get very realistic. And I need to stop looking at these kind of fetishes through that realism lens, because I need to remind myself this is very much a fantasy and cannot hurt me, cannot break the laws of physics, thankfully.
Well, would it change if it was real? Would that change your interest in it?
Mm, I remember a video when I first figured out I liked that. I'm like, I wonder if that ever could be real. And then I just like watched it and they just kind of ruined it for me because they talked about all the downsides to that. I'm like, okay, maybe I'll just stick it with fantasy. And it's the same thing if TF ever becomes real. I'm like, I think it'd be cool for other people, but I don't think I'd ever want it for myself.
The funny thing is that in terms of realism, people think of it in the angle of how agonizing it would be because it has always been, not always, but it's very often portrayed as an agonizing thing. And when people seem to enjoy the feeling of it, it is a perverse framing of it. And realistically speaking, our bodies also do a lot of things that blur the line between what seems to make sense for us and what doesn't. This also includes things like pain. So there are parallels and overlaps and all that kind of stuff between what hurts and what feels good, and why doing things that hurt can kind of feel good, and why people do things that are difficult, but they end up finding a profound enjoyment in it anyway, physically or otherwise, which is why I like to think that, yeah, I think transformation can be real and very enjoyable, even the visceral stuff.
I get what you mean. I just think I would admit, and it's going to sound very shallow, I would genuinely miss ice cream too much. I mean, even, I guess if
that's not shallow.
it's like, I view it as shallow because it's like, your whole reason for not doing this thing that would be like so groundbreaking and new is because you like Rocky Road. I'm like, have you ever had homemade ice cream?
Listen to me right now, and I'm going to call a lot of people out on it. A lot of people who want to be turned into the thing because they want to ignore life or they want to be removed from something. Very relatable. Yes, tons of people love this and all this kind of stuff. And I get why. However, I very strongly think that most of those people, the moment that they realize that their conveniences are gone and the things that they enjoyed, that they took for granted are gone, there will be a large amount of regret. Because it's not a very thoughtful decision, and it's also viewed from a very idealized way. I mean, let's go with a really common one when people talk about donkeys. And donkeys are pictured as these like really stupid animals that, they laze about, they eat and stuff like that. And that's their whole life. Yay, hooray. I wish that was me. People talk about that with frogs too. We'll do the frog thing. Frog, look at dumb frog, cute, barely knows how to fucking eat. I also think about, man, those things are really small. They're squishy. They're really vulnerable out there in the environment. The changes in water are something that can acutely affect them very easily. Like I remember learning early on that a good canary in your proverbial ecological coal mine is looking at the frogs, because if they start coming out fucked up, it means there's something wrong with the water and it could get worse. So I think of what a life like that would be. And I think there's like a lot of fun things about being a frog, but I also know a lot better about what it is to be human. And yes, it goes everything from my personhood and my ability to experience the universe all the way to I really want to play the next good Sonic game. And that's fine.
Yeah.
So bad. I don't think there's ever gonna be a good Sonic game. Again,
go fuck yourself.
I've never played
them.
This is purely just from like what I've seen on the internet.
That's bad. Go fuck you. Fuck those people. There's never going to be a good Sonic game. There was Frontiers. There were Shadow Generations. And I'm not going to turn this podcast into that subject. But thank you, Aaron Hansen, you motherfucker. You perpetuated that shit. Fuck you for that. Get over yourself. Anyway.
Well, I did have one audience question I wanted to make sure we got to, and this is an interesting one from Bolus, which I honestly had not thought of before. And so the question from Bolus is, if people started getting transformed, would you trust your local MP or congressperson to vote for bills friendly to TFEs?
I think that was probably my favorite question. No, I talk about this with people all the time. we live in a society where if you can be turned into an object or turned into an animal, they're going to find a way to monetize it. And then there's going to be lobbyists. It's not going to help. There will not be I mean, could be possibly if things changed, but we will not get a good TFE protection bill. I think it would be horrifying what they will find ways to do.
And would that go for your local person as well?
I don't think you know who my district elected, and
I don't. So
she is.
You don't have to say. I'm just asking in general.
I apologize that we put Beetlejuice back in Congress. I did not vote for her. That's all I will say.
Beetlejuice? I think Beetlejuice would be more fun.
Well, not the lady that got kicked out of it. That's who.
Oh, Jesus, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I apologize.
Christ. Well,
sorry.
that's not your fault. I will say, at least on my end, would I trust my MP to vote for a bill that was friendly for this? Probably. I'm having a lot of hesitation, just because for anyone familiar with Canadian politics, pretty much the entirety of Toronto is represented by Liberal MPs, which are fine. I would like to think they would, but I don't know fully. I would say probably on balance of probabilities, yes, but still a little hesitant there. I don't know. What do you think, Libra?
I don't know how realistic we're going to get about this, because depending on how anything goes, if the prospect of transformation ever became real with the current political climates, at least in wherever it happens to affect the three of us, I would have to say that currently it would be something that would be that rights would probably be broached into being made. Some protections would start to be installed kind of quickly. However, they wouldn't be strong enough and therefore rather abusable. And if liberals did kowtow to things like conservative biases and things like that, there would probably be a block on something like transformation, because it would go against the whole godly shit that they try to grift on, and that some of them, the ones that do believe in the fucking really crazy people, they wouldn't let it happen anyway. So then there would be the other scenario that should be considered in this question, which would be, do you think it would even be able to happen? Because frankly, they probably wouldn't let it. And but like, of course, assuming that that they did and that it's just going to go through with it, then that's kind of like what it is. If it couldn't be stopped, then I suppose that it would have to be sure. I will afford some trust. However, always know that you have to pressure your political figures in many different ways so that they will actually do the thing, because then they'll actually do it.
Correct.
Stop your powers and oligarchs from destructing you and your planet.
Cool. Well, that was all the questions I had. I don't know, Doggo, if you had any questions for us.
Sure, I think I have about one for each of you, and I apologize in advance. What's the best Sonic game?
The best Sonic game?
Yeah, give me one to play that will convince me that there have been good ones.
Jesus Christ. That's that's kind of an unfair question, because
I have a very low standard. So it can just be okay.
Oh, do you? Do you? Okay. Well,
video games that often.
Here's the problem. Here's the problem. The generational divide between what is considered a good Sonic game and what is supposed to be a Sonic game is something that has become really controversial, because there's a lot of people who like two kinds of gameplay, and there's two kinds of gameplay that dominate it, and one of them is an old style 3D stuff, which now has been now people think of Sonic Mania as like the standard for it. So you could play that one if you want to play a good Sonic game that everybody loves. I think it's fine. So I guess Sonic Mania would be your good modern equivalent to try out if you want to know about a good Sonic game. If you want to talk about it, but if I want to give you like a really good, more modern interpretation, Shadow Generations is excellent. So let me give you two
Yes.
recommendations because they are two very distinctly different play styles. And when the first Sonic Generations came out, it was a matter of they had to make pretty much two different games, one with 2D and 3D kind of aspects around. However, if you start going through Sonic's history, there's a lot of different shits. So that's another reason people may say something like Sonic is never good. And that's because they just don't like Sonic, but they can't say it's not good. Because Mario, for instance, and yeah, I'm going to go there, Mario has become largely fucking boring. And when Mario Wonder came out and I was watching it, I'm like, this looks kind of boring. I'd probably enjoy it a little bit, but I wouldn't want to pay for this. And Mario, and it's kind of weird because, I'll close with this because I think it's ironic about the attitude that people take with Sonic. People will say that Sonic is anywhere from like a corporate shill, exclusively uncreative, born of whatever, which is true because originally it was made with the express purpose to overtake Mario in the market. And now it's the only major franchise that I can think of that has a major cultural impact that also now has fan creators, people from fucking YouTube, other musicians. There's a lot of things being pulled in to make a Sonic game that isn't just this internal team, you know? And they've been trying a lot of things, and they've been experimenting, and they've been trying to make sure that Sonic never stays the same. Mario, I feel, has gone from something kind of whimsical and inspirational to something that's kind of very safe, and I feel has kind of leaned into like a few people's very concentrated vision. And Mario doesn't really get to go anywhere. So it's kind of gone from the games that people still know, play, and love, and I still even love some of those old games. But now, like, it's kind of gone back to being a toned-down version of the older things. So, like, I guess that's one of the reasons that I'm also saying any of this, because the idea that people say there has never been a good Sonic game actually do not know what they're talking about, and they should just admit that they don't like Sonic rather than just making that kind of fucking claim and making you and other people think that it's just bad all around. That's so fucking stupid. That is so stupid. Zil, what's your answer?
I mean, I would say Shadow Generations because I'm married to Shadow, so like I have to say that. But also, it is a really good game, and I really enjoyed playing it. So like, I would also say that from the merits alone.
The Shadow marriage not come up when we were talking at FWA?
I don't know. We only had so much time, Ratchet. So you know.
I thought you were married?
I am.
Okay, so Ratchet, Shadow. Am I missing
Rocket?
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
And Garrus. So you know, they're all married to me.
How do you marry a pool toy?
That's a great question for another conversation.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is I have to come out to Toronto and find out. Cool.
Yeah, clearly. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on, Doggo. It was really good to have you. And where can people find you online if they're looking for your stuff?
That's a question I ask myself sometimes too. Okay, I literally I use Blue Sky mostly. I have a Telegram channel. And occasionally, if I remember and I'm very bored, I will upload stuff to FA. But your best bet is going to be probably where you find the link to this. Because I always see your guys' stuff come up on Blue Sky. So I would say from there.
Gotcha. And your DoggoDraws on Blue Sky, right?
Could be. I actually don't check.
Okay. Yes, I'm looking at it now. So the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, yeah, thank you so much again for coming on, and thank you everyone for listening. I hope that y'all had a good time listening to our conversation. And in the meantime, as Libra has reminded me, please repent to your weather lords. It's very important. We should cherish our weather, whether it's good or bad. And I hope that y'all have a good week. Keep an open mind and stay TFy.
Man, don't stay in the dark. If you think Sonic games are shit overall, play some other ones. Christ almighty.